are Turo hosts all over the country playing with fire. And by fire, I mean the federal government and the United States justice system. And today we're going to be talking about it because this is a concerning trend. Last month, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal for a piece that they were running about car sharing. And in the interview that I had with this journalist, he asked me a question along the lines of, what do you think about Turo hosts taking out a bunch of auto loans at once, essentially gaming the system? And my response was something along the lines of, I think that this is an extremely risky strategy. I would never advise anyone to do it. And I think that people who do this are playing with fire and they're absolutely doing something that is borderline, if not totally illegal. Well, when the Wall Street Journal article was published, the idea of buying multiple cars at once from multiple dealerships was mentioned in the article. Then a few days later, I saw a post on one of the Turo Facebook groups, and I saw that somebody was asking a question about growing and scaling a car-sharing fleet and how other hosts went about doing this. And there were so many car-sharing hosts that said that they use this exact strategy to grow and scale their own fleets. So many people said that every few years, they'll go to a bunch of different dealerships, get 5 to 10 different loans, and then they'll use those 10 cars for the next few years, pay them down, and then rinse and repeat. Now, let me explain this for anyone who isn't familiar with this idea. What this is saying is that a lot of people grow and scale their car sharing fleets using financed cars. The problem, though, is that if you're financing cars personally, even if you're financing them under your LLC, you're at some point going to hit a cap of how many cars you can finance. At some point in time, the lenders and the banks are going to say, yeah, you've taken on way too much debt. Your debt-to-income ratio is off. You have too many unpaid off cars. We're not going to approve you anymore. And so the way that people get around this is by buying multiple cars within a very short period of time before their loans and inquiries hit their credit report. Because when you buy a car, when you buy anything using credit, that doesn't hit your credit report instantly. It takes a few weeks or in some cases 30 days. And so if you go to a bunch of different dealerships and you get approved for all of these loans and you purchase all of these cars within a very short period of time, like within a few days or a week, all of these different lenders won't know that you took out a bunch of different loans between the time that you applied for their loan and you got approved. So lender A, B, C, D, and E may approved you for an auto loan, but they did this under the premise that you're only going to buy one car instead of 5. So what people do is they'll go to a Kia dealership in the morning, they'll go buy a car, then they'll stop by a Ford dealership in the afternoon and they'll buy a Ford, and then they'll stop at a Chevy dealership in the evening and they'll buy a Chevy, and they'll rinse and repeat this for a couple of days until they bought a bunch of different cars. And before these lenders even know what's going on, this borrower is now hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and their debt-to-income ratio is absolutely out the window. This is fraud. And this is very much illegal. Not only does this have significant personal financial ramifications, but it also potentially has legal ramifications as well. And I want to talk about both of them here. Now, the mindset that people have whenever they do this is that if they rent these cars out on Turo, they'll basically put as much money as they can into paying off these loans. And before you know it, all of these cars are paid off, their credit score is back up, and all is right in the world. The problem is, though, is that this is a best case scenario, and the reality is the best case scenario isn't always what ends up playing out. What if you accidentally don't follow the terms of service and you get kicked off the Turo platform? What if your car gets wrecked and now you're underwater on this loan? What if your bank finds out and then they call your loan? All of these scenarios are ones that very realistically could play out, and if you end up maxing out your credit for the sake of getting more and more cars on Turo and any of these situations play out, well, you're screwed. I always get very nervous whenever I hear about car sharing hosts sacrificing their personal credit for the sake of growing their car sharing fleet. Take it from someone who had a 500 credit score about 4 years ago and has built their credit score to the high 700s. Having a good credit score is one of the most important assets that you have, and sacrificing that is simply not worth it whenever it comes to illegally financing a dozen cars. Not only that, but this is almost certainly illegal, even if the waters surrounding this topic are a bit muddy. Loan fraud or lending fraud is defined as fraud encompassing any kind of deceitful actions designed to gain a financial advantage during a loan process. And there are 3 tiers of loan fraud: first-party loan fraud, second-party loan fraud, and third-party loan fraud. First-party loan fraud is defined as when an applicant intentionally provides false information or exaggerated financial status to get approval for credit they might not have ordinarily qualified for. For example, this type of loan fraud was incredibly prevalent during the PPP and EIDL loan days during COVID and stimulus. And according to federal sentencing guidelines, loan fraud can come with a $1,000 fine and up to 30 years in prison. There are videos on YouTube with 780,000 views. In fact, there are dozens of videos with tens of thousands of views talking about this exact same business model to use in order to grow your Turo fleet. Granted, these are older videos, but this strategy is still actively being used today for people who are just getting started with Turo.
I know the process now, so I understand it. And I also understand that the credit report only shows what's active. It doesn't show any new inquiries. It doesn't show new trade lines until 30 days. I go into these dealerships now and I tell the salesperson, yo, I'm interested in the car after doing research. I'm interested in this car, but when you run my report, I don't want you to send my credit report to all these different banks. They'll see this amazing report and like, oh yeah, he's good for the car, we'll give him the car. But then I'll go to Chevrolet.
And they don't, so when you get your credit ran, you go to the dealership, they run your credit. They see, whatever you have on your credit right then.
That's all they see.
Even if you bought a car that day, when you go to another lot,
yes,
they don't see the car you just bought.
No.
And it doesn't upload for 30 days.
Upload. So I leverage that.
Shake your hand. That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
And the thing is, this creator isn't the only one talking about this. He's just the largest. There are hundreds of different posts online, hundreds of TikToks of people either teaching others how to do this or bragging about the fact that they did it themselves. And quite frankly, it pisses me off. Anyone who does this does not care about their financial future, or they're just extremely risky to the point where it's borderline stupid. And anyone telling others to do this is someone that you shouldn't be taking advice from. And anyone who is selling a course teaching you how to do this is simply a snake. Listen, I personally benefit from people joining Turo and from people wanting to learn how to grow and scale their Turo fleet. I have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to this. I have a course. I benefit financially whenever people are interested in joining Turo. And yet here I am making this video telling you guys who are watching to never, ever, ever do this, even if it means that you will never try Turo. And anyone who is telling you to try this is somebody that cannot be trusted. Simple as that. There is a reason why I've been on Turo for 7 years and I only have 27 cars. It's because I have been dedicated to growing and scaling my fleet in a sustainable, smart way. And while I have financed a couple of cars over the years, like my Jeep Wrangler, which was my personal car turned into my Turo car, or my Maserati Ghibli, which I purchased a couple of years ago, but for the most part, I have used cash cars to grow my fleet because it is the safest way to go about doing this. And as a result of this, sure, I don't have hundreds of cars sitting here 7 years later, but I do have a fleet of 27 completely paid off vehicles. And while I have opened up to the idea of financing a couple of cars for the sake of starting a Turo business, I think maybe financing 3 at an absolute maximum can be a good play depending on the rate and the terms of the loan. I think that 3 is the absolute maximum. At most, finance 3 cars, pay those off, and then finance a couple of more. But never under any circumstances do this under false pretenses. And never finance more than you could pay out of pocket if Turo was to disappear tomorrow. I believe strongly that the best way to grow a car sharing fleet is with cash cars. I think the second best option is to finance your first couple cars, buy a couple of cash cars, and then kind of rinse and repeat that, ensuring that you're not financing more than a couple at a time. But doing this method that I've outlined in this video is a way that I would never, ever even consider. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I wanted to make this video because this is a subject that's worth repeating. This idea has been around for a long time, and people have been growing their car sharing fleet this way for years. But the fact that this was mentioned in this Wall Street Journal article, and then I randomly saw it on a Facebook page a couple of days later, it goes to show that people are still exploring this idea for growth today in 2023. And as someone who makes a living off of teaching people how to start and scale car sharing fleets, I feel as though it's my duty to steer people in the right direction. And this, under any circumstance, is always a bad idea. So please never do it. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.